here. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We got a fun panel coming up. Who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be great. So I'm joined today by Allison and Erica of Because the Beatles, the podcast you may know from Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Let's introduce yourselves, you guys. Or say hi.
Hi. I'm Erica.
So
I'm Allison.
You to kind of introduce yourselves on what your podcast is and who you are, and let's start there.
Okay, sure. So we're Because of the Beatles. The podcast has been around for about 2 years, and we like to put a second generation female focused lens on the things that we're talking about. We talk about anything and everything, and we just want to fill that void. We don't think that there are enough second and third generation voices out there, especially women. So that's
True.
One of our main goals.
Love it.
Yeah, and we are both writers, Beatles historians, we say, and hopefully in not like a pretentious way, but definitely big fans. We met because we were both writing about the Beatles, and because we just, you sort of attract those people, when you're kind of in that circle. So we've both moderated panels at Fest for Beatles fans before, and we were supposed to be the official podcast of Abbey Road and the River this year. Sadly.
We will next time
Yes,
we're all together.
I've been going to Abbey Road and the River since I was, when it started in Cleveland. I went the first few years.
So 2002.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the first year it moved to Kentucky. I went as well. Mm-hmm. So this is super exciting. We're happy to be here.
You haven't been for so long.
I know.
10 years.
I know. 15. Oh my God.
Wow. Yeah, I was super excited to have you guys come to Abbey Road on the River. That was going to be awesome. Our first podcast. And there's I feel like that's a new kind of medium for Beatles fans to get their get their chats on, to talk about the Beatles and hear other people talking about the Beatles. It's such an interesting thing that I don't think I ever really thought about, that there could be an outlet for just people talking about the Beatles and listening to it. But actually, that's what we love about Beatle festivals and Abbey Road on the River, is just talking about the Beatles to people. So it makes sense that there's an influx of Beatle podcasts lately.
Yeah, and the fan base is so huge, and what else do we want to do except obsess with our fans, our other friends about the Beatles? Mm-hmm. And I don't know about you, but I didn't have a lot of Beatles friends growing up because that was not my era. And
it's kind of weird.
Yeah, totally weird. There was one other kid in my middle school who liked the Beatles, and he was not he was weird. He was a weird guy. And every once in a while, we wouldn't talk, but he would come up to me and he would just randomly rapid fire Beatle trivia questions at me. And then walk away. And I was
that sounds like a middle schooler.
That's the only Beatles friend I know. So.
And that man, ladies and gentlemen, was David Berkowitz. I'm kidding.
No.
Yeah, no, same. I have to tell the story. I had to manufacture a Beatles friend. I forced my childhood best friend to love the Monkees and then the Beatles.
Oh, a real person, not an imaginary friend.
Oh, no.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, no, I just manipulated a real person, which is, totally fine.
Yeah. No.
But yeah, so so that worked. I mean, it wasn't hard. So any kids, go and brainwash your friends. It works.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that's kind of what I did too. I was hey, I found this these cool records, and if you come over, we're gonna listen to them, and I think I forced a bunch of my friends to be the Beatles for Halloween with me in middle school. I was we're doing this. You have to do it with me.
Are there photos?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We're all dressed. We each picked one, and there were 4 of us, and I don't know if they really wanted to do that, but I definitely appreciated them for buying the wigs and dressing up as men.
Good friends.
Wow, it cost them money and they still did it. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are good friends.
Yeah. So, and yeah, I love what you said about that you guys are a female voice. I say you guys because I'm from Wisconsin. It doesn't mean anything.
No offense taken at all. Don't worry.
Ohio, hey. Yeah.
Yeah.
All good.
West. Yeah. But yeah, there's not as much female voice out there talking about the Beatles. So I think that's very important that we especially highlight these female voices. So
yeah, we definitely feel the same. That's something that's all too apparent in the Beatle world, on the internet, anywhere the Beatles are discussed, that, if we can get involved in the conversations, even if it's, a little bit difficult sometimes, it's still really important and it's worthwhile, because there are some really amazing Beatles scholars and women with great opinions have written amazing books, and, we just want to be part of that.
And it shouldn't be difficult. And so we're trying to talk about it more and more so that it's not difficult, in for the next generation, because there will obviously be tons of Beatles fans in the next one too.
Yeah, changing the norm, getting into the male-dominated field of Beatledom. I don't know.
It's weird. Yeah, it shouldn't be this way.
It shouldn't, but it is.
But it is. So, well, that's good. I admire you guys for what you're doing and leading the way, and feminism.
Well, thank you for having us.
We love
Abbey Road and the River. I only got to go once because I lived in DC, and I was lucky enough to go when you guys were in DC. It was so good. So good.
I've heard great stories about it when it was in DC.
It was fun. It's like 300 degrees, but really fun.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's funny. Well, cool. Let's get into. I want to ask you let's talk about John first and foremost, because it is his birthday.
Let's.
John.
Yes, John Lennon.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Just in case.
A lot of Johns.
There are a lot of Johns.
Oh, you don't mean John Kerry? I'm in the wrong podcast. I gotta go.
I met him once. It was great.
Did you? Cool.
That is cool.
A side note, yes. Anyway. Yes, John Lennon.
But yeah, John is it's his birthday, so let's talk about, I kind of just want to speculate about what he would be like, if you have any opinions on if he was alive today, because he would have been 80 this weekend. So, and this year actually marks 40 years since 40 years he was alive and 40 years since he's been gone. So it's kind
of wild.
Big milestone. Yeah. I mean, it's hard for us as second, third generation Beatle fans to wrap our heads around, because we weren't there during the whole time. But
yeah. The thing that has hit me hard, I don't know if you guys have thought about this, but as I get older, when I was a kid, John's been gone my whole life. So I was sort of he died at 40, whatever. And now that I'm getting older, I'm in my 30s, I'm like, holy crap, he was a baby. I mean, 40 is not old at all. And it makes it that much more tragic to me. It's he had a whole life ahead of him. He wasn't even probably halfway through. I mean, it was, that's the thing that I've been thinking about this a lot, of course, with his 80th birthday approaching. And that's one thing that's definitely weighed heavy on me.
Yeah, for sure. I hear you.
Yeah. I think if he lived today, he would not be happy with the state of the country. I think that he would have stayed. I think he was kind of a New Yorker at heart. I think he still would have been living where he was in the Dakota. He would have been my neighbor almost. I would have been able to walk by John and see him on the street. I think he would have been very outspoken politically. I mean, unlike, Paul does it in his subtle way. But I think that John really would have been a voice. I think he would have been the kind of guy who was speaking at the Democratic National Conventions and really speaking out against the absurdity. I mean, it's one thing to be vocal about political movements, but I mean, I think combined with the absurdity, I feel like John would have found this so crazy, amusing and awful at the same time. But I feel like his sense of the absurd would have kicked in for just how ridiculous life has become in our world.
I think he would have updated a couple of songs. I think he probably would have updated Give Me Some Truth, Nobody Told Me. I mean, or just, this would have been, a playground for him. But I think he had been just really, really angry too. I think it's so hard to speculate. I was listening, I don't know if you guys listened to the interviews from last weekend with Sean on BBC Two, and I think it was Elton John asked him, have you given any thought to what your dad would be doing, if he were around today? And Sean's like, yeah, I have, but it's really hard. It's really hard to say because everything's, you know, the internet. John Lennon couldn't fathom the internet. He didn't have an email address, you know. Just everything in the world has changed. And I do think I mean, I don't know. I would have loved to seen him in like Reagan America. He probably would have like railed against that. You know, up through the bush. Yeah, it's he wouldn't have been happy, but he may have been motivated.
Yeah.
That's my sort of opinion.
John Lennon with an email address. Can you imagine? John at...
It would have been an AOL.com address.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Probably.
Like every other 60s artist.
LennonJohn@hotmail.com.
Lennon John.
Lennon John. Yeah.
Lennon John 909.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I feel like, he probably would have been like angry with the world. I wonder if he, I was talking to someone else about it and they were like, I think he just would have been like really passive and just would have not been engaging at all, which I found was, thought was an interesting, you know, thought that he would just be like, oh, whatever, it's not like my deal and I'm not going to get into it and people just figure it out. Or I wonder if he would just like be retired and be like, yeah, I'm not writing music anymore. And like, I'll vote and I'll, you know, tweet or whatever. Like
he would definitely tweet. I could see him being one of those people that like tweets their searches or something. It's just sort of like,
oh no, you're not giving John enough credit.
Well, I mean, he would do that all the time, but I could totally see him just be like, I hate this. Like, I don't know, or just like non sequiturs, which would have been great. I would have been into
right. True. It would have been like his new art form of like, what was his book called? Why can't I think of it?
In His Own Right?
In His Own Right, yeah. Like, but it would be
there they are.
Right there. Wow.
I just happen to have them here with me at all times. I keep them at my side.
See, I think John would have been less angry. I feel like looking, and I'm just totally extrapolating out of what I see from Yoko, but like Yoko is so interested in spreading her message and the kind of peace and love message that she's always had through her art. You know, if you look at her Twitter account and the Iceland, what is it? The light thing.
The tower.
Yeah, the Tower of Light. Tower. And even the 72nd Street subway here in New York, it's got Imagine Peace murals all over it. I feel like maybe John would have stepped back from the revolutionary type aspect and the anger aspect, and maybe he would have worked together a little bit more with her to try and spread a kinder message.
Like subtle.
I don't know. Yeah, because I think I'm only speculating, obviously, but in his last few years, he became more of a family man. He became a bit more subdued. And, you know, if that's where Yoko was going, maybe he would have been.
Right.
Just very,
and with age, you
peaceful.
kind of, take less risks and kind of move like towards that. Yeah, that's an interesting.
I wonder if he would still be together with Yoko. You know,
that's an interesting.
There's a rumor, you know, there's been rumors that they were sort of headed for a divorce when he was murdered. I don't know how true that's total speculation. I have nothing to back that up. So it's just like crap I've heard over the years. But I would like to think so. You know, they had gone through a really rough period and they came out the other side, and, you know, they had Sean and they had just completed another record that came out, you know, after John tragically passed away. And, you know, I think Yoko probably would have come into her own more as a musician in the 80s, kind of like how she did a little bit, you know, in the new wave. And maybe he would have taken a backseat because she would have been, you know, maybe being the breadwinner again or something.
I wonder how John would have dealt with the 80s musically. Because we know how Paul dealt with the 80s musically, and I don't know about that, but...
Oh, I would have loved to say, oh my God, I want John to be alive again just to like react to all of Paul's.
I mean, I think he would have loved it, because the thing that made him go back into the studio was Coming Up. Paul's song, Coming Up, that's kind of like the harbinger of terrible 80s stuff, so he might have loved it.
He might have. I mean, he was hanging out with, of course, Warhol and the whole factory crew who evolved. A lot of those people evolved into the 80s, you know, pop stars. So, and he, you know, Warhol himself was very into the 80s. So I could see John being pulled into the whole you know, MTV generation kind of thing.
Yeah.
You love TV too, so there you go. It's like everything you could ever want.
I wonder how the anthology would have panned out.
Well, here's the thing, like just on a meta level, or, you know, big picture level, if John had not died, everything would be different, right? Because John was murdered, because John died, he was the first to die, he died very suddenly and very tragically, you know, there's a whole mythos and deification that's emerged around John, right? So the anthology, while it was like the first sort of formal history of the Beatles by the Beatles, you know, it was also colored with that sort of like honoring John, like, you know, sort of filling in the gaps for him, and like, you know, sort of elevating him to like whatever, this martyr kind of thing. Not the Beatles themselves, but I think the project sort of, it had to have that a little bit.
Yeah, that air of reverence.
Yeah, and I think everything since has sort of had to have that, or else, you know, it's a little bit taboo to like not treat John like a saint, you know? So that's really the thing that intrigues me. I was listening to, I did a full listen of John's discography and made a Spotify playlist of my highlights, plug. And it really struck me, because I always am wondering to myself, like, okay, whose solo catalog do I like the most? And usually it's between John and Paul. And I'm like, God, if John had not died, like, what would I think of this catalog? And I'm like, it's okay. Like, I mean, I think I do like Paul's catalog more, even though John's my favorite Beatle. So it's really interesting. It's interesting to, you know, think about the reverence for his music. And is it really that good? That's a whole like other topic, but there's a lot packed into the speculation.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I actually used to not really like John solo music at all until, like, as I was always like, oh, there's no melody, and like, what is this? And it's only like a guitar and him singing, or like piano and him like, what's going on? And I used to always like Paul better because it was so like more fun and melodic. But late in the last couple of years, I have like learned to appreciate just his music, John's music, for like the art form of like the poetry with the music. It's just like, here's what I have to say, and I'm going to say it in this song, and that's the end. And why add a bunch of flourishes on it? So
yeah, I think it's a lot harder to, if you
appreciate it more.
If you come to the Beatles as a kid, it's not easy to appreciate a lot of what John did. I mean, I remember we had the Two Virgins album in my house, and it was like, I'd like sneak peek at it, like, oh my God. Like, it was
you're like, that guy's so weird.
That's so strange. Like, why does he do that?
Yeah, you're just have that hanging out in your house as a kid. I can't imagine.
It was in a paper sleeve.
Like, of course it was, because it was
like porn.
It was bad. Yeah. Well, I mean, we were at Beatles at the Ridge last year, I think, when we were talking with a friend of ours about, I mean, I would take the Beatles anthology book to school, and I think the Two Virgins pictures on like page 300, because I remember the number. I'd be like, guys, look at this. And we had a whole conversation about how a whole generation, that was their first exposure to like nudity in photography, and a generation of Beatle fans. So thanks, John and Yoko. Rad, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, what were we saying? The kid. Yeah. So yeah, that's a great point, Erica, because I'm realizing too, as I'm listening through the catalog, it's like, I liked a lot of the, like you say, Melissa, like anything with a melody. So like Crippled Inside, even though it's a very dark song, it's like, I really like the bouncy, you know, melody of it. I liked, like, I love Oh Yoko. It's beautiful. Like, just things with like a major key sort of like pop airishness to it. But this time I sort of like picked out the lyrics, and I was like, wow, I can relate to that. I can relate to that too. And that, it's like, you know, so that is the quality of John's music that makes it a much deeper catalog, and a rich catalog. Is he's always been very honest in his music, going back to the Beatles, but yeah, he has the guts to say things that I don't know if Paul ever did, to say it straight anyway.
No, definitely not. I mean, Paul would never come out with a song like Mother. Never have.
God.
Yeah.
Although it's interesting because, you know, there's the new compilation coming out for John's Birthday, Give Me Some Truth. I didn't know this. Maybe you guys have seen this. I sent the clip to Erica because I was like, what the heck? But there's a clip of John and Paul in the studio. I think it's around 68, 9, where they're playing and sort of collabing on Give Me Some Truth. And I thought that was very interesting because I never knew that Paul had anything to do with that. Because I always thought like, oh, that's about Paul. Like any salty song of John's from that period, I'm like, oh, that's about Paul. Like he's calling him out.
It might still be about Paul.
It might still be about Paul. Like, yeah, John's like, haha, you're helping me write this song. It's about you. But yeah, I thought that was so interesting too. You know, you think about their collaborations and, you know, the differences in their styles, but yet there's this totally raw song that is wholly John. And here's Paul like working on it. What the heck? It's so weird.
And then Paul's like, here's Teddy Boy. What do you think of this?
Right. It starts their back and forth of like, yeah, talking crap about each other on their albums.
Oh, God.
Their songs, yeah. Maybe kind of John as a feminist, if you guys have any ideas because I feel like John in his early days was like very kind of chauvinist, and he talks about how he kind of regretted certain songs that he wrote, or how he treated certain people, and then how he kind of moved into this like more open-minded, almost like once he met Yoko, it felt like he kind of turned a page, and like his eyes were open to like how he used to be, and that maybe it changed after her, but maybe it was somewhere else along the line. But I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. Do you want to go? Or
we have a lot of
we
definitely have
that was a
thoughts
big
on
question.
that. Yeah. I mean, do you want to start, Erica? You go ahead.
Sure.
Go off.
I think John has really said that Yoko fully, you know, started opening his eyes to what it means to, you know, be a woman in society, what it means to be a feminist, and that, you know, growing up as a, you know, Liverpool scruff, he was not, you know, that was not something that you could do, and macho-ness was what was required. You needed to be tough. You needed to be, you know, nasty. And
right. Well, for survival.
Yeah. And especially, I mean, he was so hurt. You know, he grew up in a very strong female family. If you think about all of the Stanley line, Mimi and Julia and the sisters, and, you know, he was, except for his Uncle George, everybody that he has spent a lot of time with in his younger days, you know, his father was gone, so mostly was female. And I feel personally that he did have a lot of innate respect for women because of that, because of growing up like that, but that he had to be a certain way to survive in the society that he lived in. And he was also in a lot of pain. So I feel like he used you know, mocking people and, you know, putting them off and just being mean to people as a way to lash out because of his own personal pain. And I think probably some of that came to Cynthia, especially. You know, she seemed like a very meek and understated sort of person. And I think in a lot of ways she probably took it. And, you know, but I don't feel like that was him. I feel like he was always searching for something. You know, he was always a searcher, whether it was drugs or alcohol or India or, you know, whatever it was. He was always looking for whatever, you know, something to fill that emptiness, I think. And I think Yoko was really one of the first things that he felt did that for him. And, you know, but in order for him to accept that, Yoko had to be, you know, he had to accept that Yoko was not going to take that from him, and that he needed to learn a new way of being in the world. And I think he listened to her. And, you know, I don't know if he ever would have marched for women's rights. I don't think that he cared about it in the same way that he cared about anti-war demonstrations and such. But I do think that he developed a greater respect, and that's due to Yoko.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you know, when you talk about John's pain, it does, I think, come a lot from Julia. You know, his mother, not her death particularly. Her death obviously played a big part in it, but it was the fact that she was alive and she still didn't want him. And so you consider how much abandonment, you know, how many issues with abandonment that caused John. And so you see this pattern throughout his life of him constantly pushing people away, which is common. You know, people with abandonment issues are like, you know, I'm going to just like reject you before you reject me. And so I think a lot of his, I don't want to use the word, a lot of his problems towards Cynthia, or, you know, whatever their relationship was him sort of like testing the waters. I think it was a lot of him doing the whole, you know, trying to push her away. And yeah, she was, you know, I don't think they ever would have gotten married if she hadn't gotten pregnant. I think it was a lot of frustration about that. You know, they were very young, and I think it was just a bad situation all around. You know, obviously I don't agree with John's reaction, and I have a lot of problems with John that we won't get into. But yes. I don't think that anybody is above redemption. I do think Yoko, being a very strong feminist, working that into her art, you know, that's a really intrinsic part of who she is, not only personally, but professionally. And as she instilled in John these concepts of like right and wrong, you know, with peace and love and war and, you know, all of these really sort of like higher thinking topics, you know, I think he was enlightened to his own behavior. And that's what you see kind of come out in his music, you know, as he realizes like, oh, that was bad. Like I did that and it was bad. You know, I was cruel to my woman, I beat her. Wow. You know, and, you know, I don't know if he ever sort of like came to terms with that with Cynthia or even himself of that period in his life. But I do think like he had, like Erica said, he had an awakening with Yoko. She wouldn't have taken it. You know, she did like sort of force them out of the nest, you know, for the last weekend. Mm-hmm. And so it was very clear to him that like, you know, she didn't have a problem. Like she could go on her life without him. So he had to like straighten up and play right.
And he probably did. Yeah, go ahead.
No, but so, you know, John is a feminist. I think I agree with you, Eric. I don't see him like being vocally feminist, but I do think he would have not been a jerk like he had been.
Yeah. He did have that one song, Woman is the N-word of the World.
Right.
Which was based on something that Yoko said. Yeah. And I think that he believed in it, but I also wonder if he wanted to write that song because it would be incendiary.
Yeah, I could see both of those arguments being true on that one. Yeah. It's a great song though.
Yeah.
And it does have a powerful message.
Yeah, but not appropriate anymore. And
right.
Yeah,
no, I mean, we can't compare ourselves to the Black experience. I'm sorry. Like it's just not possible. Unfortunately, great idea, like great sentiment. Unfortunately, it just doesn't, you know,
it's very of its time.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Well, we could get into a whole thing about that. Down a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah. There's a ton of like offshoot podcasts.
There are a lot. Yeah, that's true. Cool. Thank you for your thoughts. That's great. I love just like speculating about, I know it's like terrible to speculate about John. We don't even know him. We don't know what he would be doing now. Like we didn't know him when he was alive, obviously. So like, it's, you know, maybe blasphemy to even speculate, but I just think it's cool to discuss like what everyone thinks he would be doing and like how he got to a certain point. And I'm sure he would like hate that we're talking about him too.
John was cool with the idea of people getting together and like enjoying the Beatles experience as a community. Mm-hmm. I think the deification thing would have freaked him out.
Totally.
But, you know, he didn't know that was going to be a thing at the time.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I totally. And I often wonder too, because by the time he died, he had been very kind of removed from the whole like peace and love thing. That was very much like his early solo career, like the Imagine album, and it trickles through. But you know, by the time I get to Double Fantasy, there's not so much content on that by way of songwriting that's dedicated to the anti-war movement or peace and love and all these social rights causes. But you know, because of his untimely death, like I was talking about before, it's like that's what people sort of henpeck out of there. It's like, oh, he was this, crusader for civil rights. Like, was he? Like, I don't think he really was. So I think
he also wrote a lot of songs about drugs. So which one was it?
Yeah,
I mean, he had a lot of periods in his life.
He liked heroin. Like, there's that too. Like, so there's all these things you could like toss around about John. Yeah. He wasn't perfect. He was definitely not a perfect person. Mm-hmm. So I think he would think a lot of it was very funny that, the reverence surrounding him.
Right.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of that, like he can do no wrong and everything he said is great. But I feel like, it's just like he just wrote based on his own experience. He wasn't doing it to like be a leader. It was just like what he saw and what he experienced in his life. And
because he had that,
like how he grew. He was just like growing through his artwork and his music.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And he had that platform. There were only 4 Beatles. And it's like they have the biggest platform in the world. So it's like any old hippie, pick a band from the 60s, and I guarantee you they have like, at least a handful of anti-war songs or along that line. Mm-hmm. But because he's a Beatle and he's writing these songs and he's performing them live and he's with Yoko Ono and all the stuff, it makes this perfect mm-hmm. storm of like, for him to get sort of pegged as, this, like I said, this crusader for, social justice causes. Mm-hmm. Right. In perpetuity. Yeah. Forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the fact that Imagine is his, most well-known song, and, that's the anthem of peace and love right there.
Mm-hmm. But I appreciate you guys taking time and like, doing this
anytime.
This was
fun. Love you guys. Yeah. So whatever you want from like, we're totally down to clown mm-hmm. with AROTR.
Yeah. I know we got to think of more ideas since we've never worked with a podcast before. We were like, what do we do with them on site? I don't know.
What do we do with this? Yeah, same. We're like, what do we do with this? Yeah, we're just kind of, making it up as we go. It's going okay so far, I guess.
Yeah. Seems like it is. You guys
well, hopefully, everything will be back in person next year, and
oh my God,
we'll have to just party harder.
Where can people find you online? Where can people find your podcast?
You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere.
Yep, everywhere you get your podcast. And if you want to follow us on social, we are at BC the Beatles on every platform.
Okay. BC the Beatles.
Twitter, Instagram.
The Beatles.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Indeed.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks you guys for joining. And
thanks for having us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.